So the Champions League group stage, table stage is over. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was better than the group stage. I thought it was entertaining because of what my team was going through. I was stressing the whole way through. And I'm not going to go over my predictions from the last video of the group stage or table stage predictions. Just know it was awful. I had City to be top. They came 22nd. I had Madrid, Bayern, and Dortmund to come top 8. They all are in the playoffs. I had Lille getting eliminated. They are in top 8. So overall, it was awful. And the only team I got spot on was Club Brugge. And that's the team who we're going to start with. So Club Brugge are going to go against Atalanta in the first playoff game. Some of the notable games that Club Brugge had was beating Villa and Sporting, and then drawing to Juve and Celtic. They're all teams that were in the playoffs, or Villa, they were in top 8, and they got points from them. So Club Brugge is a very defensive and then counter-attacking team, and that's why they only had 11 goals conceded, which is pretty low for Club Brugge, but they only scored 7, so their counters weren't working that well. But honestly, Club Brugge is not going to be able to handle Atalanta, who I think would take this one. But I do want to talk about Atalanta. They drew to Arsenal and they drew to Barca, two tough opponents they could have lost to, but they were neck and neck with them. Atalanta only conceded 6 goals, which is one of the best in the league. And Atalanta's change of flow, or just how well they are doing, is thanks to Gasperini. I think Gasperini is such an underrated manager. If you don't rate him, you better start rating him, because he is that guy. Atalanta do have good players like Lookman and Ederson, but majority of these guys are just filler guys, and Gasperini is the one that finds their strengths and magnifies it. For this matchup, Atalanta versus Bruges, I'ma have Atalanta to go through. Next up is Sporting versus Dortmund. Sporting, they beat Lille and City, getting them 6 points, which Lille is a top 8 team, which is good, and then City, well, we're not hard to beat right now, but it's still good points to get. So Sporting started off good in the Champions League, but then in the back end, the last 4 games, after Amarin left, that's when they lost 3 games and drew 1. So out of their 11 points, only 1 of them came from the back end of the Champions League table season. So changes are happening with the Sporting team. I'm not sure about the new manager, but I think there is a system change. So they're going through a bit of a change, but so is their opponent, and that is Dortmund. Their notable game was a loss to Bologna, and that's their notable game because Dortmund had a really easy line of fixtures. They should have been beating Bologna and then qualifying for the top 8 guaranteed. They only had Barca and Madrid that were hard, but then they lost to Bologna and then slipped up. But still, Dortmund did do good. They had the second highest goal scored in the whole league apart from Barca, and they had the tied highest goal scorer with Guirassy, who had 9 goals. And the change that I was talking about was Sahin. He got sacked. He was doing awful in the Bundesliga. They're 10th right now, so they're doing bad there. But I think they're going to focus more on this competition against Sporting, and they should be going through. So next up is my team versus Madrid. I think the best matchup, you could say. So for City, their notable games were against Sporting, PSG, and Juve. We lost all of them. That's points we should be getting from all of them, but of course our season has been awful, so we didn't. I'm not going to be a delusional fan. Our weaknesses are their strengths. Our midfield is old, weak, and just can't move. And then our wing backs with Guardiola and Nunez, they've been bombing up, so there's going to be a lot of space in those wing spots, and we already know who they have, and I think they're just going to abuse our weaknesses. But let's talk about Madrid. They lost to Lille and Milan, 2 games they should have been at least getting some points from, which pushed them down to the playoff spots. But like I said, they had the perfect recipe to counter us. Their wingers like Mbappe, Vini, Rodrigo, whoever they put in the wingers, they're going to abuse those spaces. Their midfield is even stronger in my opinion, I guess. They have Valverde, Bellingham, Camavinga, Tchouaméni. I don't care who they put. It's going to out-muscle, out-pace. I think they're even more technical than our midfield. So yeah, I think it's going to be pretty easy. I think Real goes through. So next up is Celtic versus Bayern. Celtic, their notable games is a draw to Atalanta, which is good, and then a loss to Dortmund, and they got bopped by Dortmund 7-1. and that really affected them on the tables, because if it was 4-1, they would have been ahead of Juve and could have avoided Bayern and Real, but now they have Bayern. But for Celtic, all I can say is that they did better than I thought they would. I thought they were going to get eliminated, because in recent memory, Celtic hasn't been really good in European competitions, or at least in the Champions, but they did good to get in the playoffs. But I think that's the end for them, because their opponent is Bayern, and Bayern's notable games were a loss to Feyenoord and Villa, 2 games they should be getting points from. The Feyenoord game was really disappointing. They conceded 3 and then scored once. They're very comfortable in the Bundesliga right now. They're top of the league with by like 9 points or something like that. So they're very comfortable, and honestly, they could have fun with this draw against Celtic and have, beatings on Celtic, 5+ goals possibly. But yeah, Bayern goes through for me. Next up is Feyenoord versus Milan. Feyenoord, they lost to Salzburg and Lille. Salzburg is the most important one, because Salzburg was getting smacked by everybody. You can't be losing to Salzburg. They surprised me by how bad they were, because these Red Bull teams usually have good players, but not this year. Salzburg were getting smacked, and they still lost to them. But as for Feyenoord, I don't know if it's true, but comments say that without Jimenez, Feyenoord isn't that good without Jimenez. But if it is true, they're literally giving their biggest asset to their opponents right now, Milan, because Jimenez is going over to Milan. Morata already left Milan, so they're getting the replacement in Jimenez. And as for Milan, they beat Madrid. Very entertaining game. I remember it. I was celebrating every goal. And then they lost to Dinamo in the last day. They should have been beating them and pushing higher in the table. If they would have beaten Dinamo, they would have been top 8 and avoided this playoffs game. But like I said, Feyenoord is giving them Jimenez, so they're taking their biggest asset, and their striker wasn't that good. Morata's not that good, so Jimenez should be improving this Milan side, and Milan should be going through. But another thing on Milan, I don't know if it's true, Conceição being too harsh on his players. If that's true, Milan players, toughen up. It's a part of the game. You're gonna get screamed at, unless he's hitting y'all physically. But yeah, Milan goes through. Next up is Juve versus PSV. Juve beat City, and they drew to Villa and Lille, which are the more important draws or points, because Lille and Villa are in top 8, so good points to get. But still, too many draws under Thiago. They have 13 draws in the Serie A. They're still 5th place, but 13 draws is way too many, and they're doing the same thing in the Champions League. Juve is also very low scoring. They don't concede, but they're very low scoring. They only got 9 goals, and I think that's the reason they got Kolo Muani. But I think Kolo Muani is straight cheeks. I don't like Kolo Muani ever since he left Frankfurt. He hasn't done anything, but maybe Thiago can get him to start scoring again. As for PSV, their notable games are that they beat Liverpool in the last day, they drew to PSG and Sporting. So, playoff teams, and then Liverpool a top 8 team. So good points to get. But when I was looking through their games, I saw a lot of red cards. And when there was red cards, they would score. But when there was no red cards, they struggled to score. So these are 2 teams that struggle to score. So honestly, both games could be very low scoring, and it could go to pens. I don't know if there's pens in these, but it could go to that. But I think I'm going to edge it to Juve simply because of player quality. Or their strikers, I guess. PSV are still running Luuk de Jong. I think he's 35. He's pretty damn old. So I'm saying Kolo Muani is cheeks, but he's a little bit better than him. So Juve are going to go through. Next up is Brest versus PSG. The first and only same league fixture, the Ligue 1 league. So Brest, their notable game is against Leverkusen. They got a point against them, and then they beat PSV. So good points to get, but Brest is low scoring and a low conceding team. So they're one of those defensive teams as well. Honestly, don't know much about Brest, but their most notable player is Sima. I don't know how to say his first name. Abdullah, I think, maybe. But that's their most notable player. And the thing is, he's a Brighton player. Brighton strike again. I don't know how they do it, but their scouting system is great. And as for PSG, their notable fixture is against City. and beating us. And I say that's the only one because PSG's fixtures were pretty hard. They had Bayern, Arsenal, and I think Barca. They lost all of them, and it was pretty hard fixtures, so you can't blame them too much. But they should be beating Brest here. They just beat them 5-2, not like today, and so if they beat them in Liga, they should be beating them over 2 games. It should be easy work for them, so I'm gonna go for PSG. And then the last game of the playoffs stage is Monaco versus Benfica. So Monaco, their notable games, they beat Barca and Villa, 2 top 8 teams, so very good 6 points to get. But overall, Monaco were a very middle of the table team. They conceded 13 and scored 13, so bang average team. But I was unaware of Monaco's youth. They have a very young squad with talented players like Ben Saguer and Akaloachu. I don't know how to say his name, but he scored a banger recently. I remember that. And sorry to all French teams, but I had all of them going down or getting eliminated except PSG. But all of them made playoffs or top 8. So very good on them. And then there's Benfica, who beat Atletico and Juve. Good 6 points to get once again from them. They have been struggling recently in the league and in the Champions League. Their form is a little bit all over the place. Bruno Lage can't find the right things or answers, but they still have some decent quality all around the pitch. Pavlidis got a hat-trick against Barca, and then he scored against Juve. I don't know if it was a brace, but he definitely scored against Juve in the last day. Then they also have their Turkish players. I'm gonna struggle with their names. Kuko and Aktoroglu. I'm butchering the crap out of them, but those guys are good. They still have the likes of Otamendi, Di Maria, older guys, but they're still good. But honestly, I don't think it's gonna be enough to beat Monaco. I think Monaco are gonna have that Ajax run, that young team that goes far, but they won't win the whole thing, but they'll still impress players, and then they'll get picked apart later on. So I'm gonna push Monaco to go through. So those are my predictions for the playoffs. Tell me what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe, and thank you for watching.